As reports of immigration raids and roundups rock communities around the country, the farming industry is bracing for what increased enforcement could mean for their businesses and the unauthorized workers they employ. The New York Times took a closer look at a conservative farming community in California's Central Valley, where the issue has taken root. Earlier, I spoke with the co-author of that piece, New York Times reporter Caitlin Dickerson. Your colleague at the Times, Michael Barbaro, interviewed a farmer by the name of Jeff Marchini, and he is a farmer from the Central Valley of California. You write that his family has farmed there for 4 generations and that he grew up working side by side with Mexican immigrants. So I want to start off by playing a piece of tape.
You supported Donald Trump in the election.
Yeah, I voted for Donald Trump, yes.
And why did you do that?
Well, I like that. Spent his entire life building businesses and creating businesses. He's focused on the bottom line, and I think that's needed in this country.
So now that he's president and he's beginning to put immigration policy into place, how would his proposals affect you, and what do you think of them?
Well, I think, I have some uneasinesses on what's occurring. I'm still very optimistic.
Do you worry that he could ultimately deport some of your workers and force them out of the country?
I mean, that, it could very well happen. I don't believe it's going to happen. I believe he understands the importance of migrant labor to California and California agriculture. So I don't believe so, but only time will tell.
So you've reported extensively on immigration, and I wonder what your sense is, Caitlin, of how farmers like Jeff reconcile their anxieties about agriculture and trade with concern for their workers.
It's an interesting paradox that they're in, because many farmers in the Central Valley are Republicans. They voted for Trump. And I think the way that they reconcile their support for President Trump and at the same time their desire that he doesn't deport their illegal workers through this identification that they have with the president as a businessman. So they think that everything the president does is going to be based on bottom line, on transactions, on deals. They think that Trump thinks like a businessman. They consider themselves businessmen. And so they think they're on the same page.
Yeah, but undocumented immigrants, as you note in your piece, are nearly 70% of farm workers there. And so what would the ripple effect be for smaller communities in the valley, not just in farming, but in other industries, as you point out?
It would be dramatic. We spoke to business owners, everyone from insurance salesmen to the school districts to store owners who sell tchotchkes, who say, all of my clients are immigrants. The school districts say we have so many Americans employed as translators and cultural outreach support jobs, and all of those jobs would have to go away under mass deportations.
Yeah, I mean, more broadly, taking a look at the recent ICE raids that have happened, for instance, you've spoken to people in these communities. What is it that they're telling you their biggest concern is right now? Do they think that perhaps they could be next?
Yeah, I think there's an incredible amount of fear right now in immigrant communities, and all it takes is the sighting of one Department of Homeland Security van inside of a neighborhood to scare people in an entire city, in an entire county. There's an incredible amount of fear, and people just are sort of changing their routines to stay out of the way of ICE and hope that they're not next.
Yeah, describe for us, it's hard to imagine here in New York City, but what is it like in these communities? President Trump has talked about getting rid of criminals, people who are here illegally and have committed crimes. But I wonder what the presence of federal officials is really like. Is there a feeling that there are now perhaps more ICE officers out, more people on the lookout for undocumented workers?
Definitely. My inbox has been flooded with tips, and I think what I'm seeing is that now when people see a police officer or anybody who looks like they could be an official of any kind, the fear is that it's an immigration official and that they could be at risk. And what the government and ICE keeps reassuring us is that each time they go out to arrest somebody, it's a targeted effort. There may be a couple of collateral arrests, but that they're not going to, for example, parks or bus stations and just checking as many people as they possibly can. But that doesn't change the perception that people have that that is what's happening.
Yeah, and I want to ask about the ideology perhaps behind President Trump's immigration ban, for instance. Much has been made about senior policy advisor Stephen Miller and his views on immigration. You also have talked about Senator Jeff Sessions, or now Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and his views on this. Can you describe for us potentially, what is the view that both Miller and Sessions have, and how could that influence President Trump?
Well, I think Jeff Sessions has talked about immigration from a range of perspectives, including, of course, a law enforcement perspective. But what I talked about and wrote about in the Central Valley had to really do with economics. And so Stephen Miller and Jeff Sessions have talked about and written about this idea that immigrant labor lowers wages and it forces Americans out of jobs, and that if we were to eliminate the immigrant labor, both undocumented and authorized immigrants, that wages would rise, and that would lower unemployment because that would send Americans back into the fields, back into jobs that right now are really primarily and sometimes only done by immigrants.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not just talking, as you just noted, about undocumented immigrants, but people who are here working legally as well. That's the view.
Exactly.
All right. Caitlin Dickerson, thanks so much for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thank you.